Well, and goodness gracious.
Hey, by the way, Martine was just identified as the show manager, not the showrunner. I just thought I'd mention
show manager, yeah.
For whatever it's worth.
It's a fake title that I gave him to make him feel important.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that I understand. So anyway, I guess before we get in to
I'm bringing the Mark up right now.
Frivolity and Mr. Mark Center. Today, ladies, gentlemen, and others, will be our last UFO Wednesday show. Starting next week, I believe it's Monday, August the 14th on KGRA, Dark Matters 2 is coming back, my show, Dark Matters Radio. And with me will be Mr. Cassell and Mr. Center. We got a much better time slot, 5 p.m. Pacific time, and Central time is 7, and East Coast is 8. The show will run for 2 hours, and I think it promises to be just as bloody good as it was before. You know, the reason I had to basically get out of that, Gary, I fractured a vertebrae several years ago. And oh my Lord, was that miserable. Took me months to get over that. And then I dinged around for a little while with radio in a couple of different venues. And then I said, shoot, I think that's it. Until you and I reacquainted. So, in a large part, buddy, you're the reason I'm basically coming back.
Yeah, I've been pushing it.
Yeah.
And
I got Mark kicking me in the rear end every once in a while just to keep me straightened up.
Every morning I call up and go, old man, what's up?
Yeah. Well, I thought, do you want me to go ahead and show the video intro I've made for the show?
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you?
Here it goes. We're going to premiere it right here. Of course, I will fix that and put Mark's name on there because I wasn't aware that you were put into the titles until after I'd done the animation. But I did add that to the new logo, and I will retweak it.
No,
because we got to make sure Mark is mentioned.
Thank you very much.
It's okay.
Yes.
I got to share space with Mark.
Not very much.
Well, today we've got a very fascinating show coming up. Our guest. I gotta retrain myself. I'm so used to.
We're your sidekicks. You can go ahead and say your guests.
I got to retrain myself, but our guest today is Mr. Dan Willis. Dan was one of the actually the first whistleblowers back in 2001 at the Washington, D.C. Press Club. I'm going to have Dan tell you his story, but Dan was there also with a very long time and very close friend of mine by the name of Carl Wolf, who had an extraordinary situation happen to him. And back in the days that I was doing my one radio program before Dark Matters, it was called Strange Days, Daze. And we interviewed Carl in the pages of UFO magazine when Vicki and I were publishing, had been an Air Force electronic technician. He had a security clearance. He had I believe, well, it was at least secret. I don't know if he had a top secret. I know he had a secret clearance. At the time, he was stationed at Langley Air Force Base. Hey, guys, isn't there something else at Langley, too?
Yeah.
I think there is. There's something
Isn't
else.
that where American Dad takes place?
Yeah, could be. But at any rate, it was 1966. NASA had sent to the moon, because remember, this is the Apollo lunar mission is gearing up. They are trying to find out everything they can about the moon. When I was doing over 20 years of lunar research, when I was examining lunar transient phenomena and other things, I learned a hell of a lot about that. And one of the things that I discovered was that they had basically contracted a series of eggheads, okay, to do a lunar study on, and this was the shocking part, lunar phenomena. As it turns out, for over 400 years, the moon had been basically being viewed by Earth-based astronomers. Of course, they were Earth-based, and they were reporting a lot of very unusual and strange sights. Well, this was all part of the package, but we had these unmanned lunar probes up there mapping the moon. Now, the way they used to do it, these craft would be in orbit and they would shoot a strip of whatever it was they were photographing. It would go into the spacecraft, digitally, of course. It would be radioed up to the spacecraft. The spacecraft would start printing this out and send it back to Earth. Okay. Well, the stuff they were getting back at Earth would immediately be printed out. And one of the printers, and they were really highfalutin stuff then, went down. So Carl Wolf's command got a request to send over a technician. He did. He was sent over. He had to show his security ID to get in there. Now, remember, this is supposedly strictly a NASA outfit that's doing this. Well, I think we all know that's probably not exactly the truth. But he gets over there. The first thing that Carl told me when he walked in, he said, "Good God." He said, there were scientists and people there from all over the world. So he shuffled back to this room where the printer is located. He said there was one lone airman in there. There had to be somebody in there because of all the top secret equipment they had. And he asked him, well, what machine is the problem? He pointed it out. Carl starts taking a look at it. And one of the modules in this printer went kaflooey. So they had to order another one. So while they're there chatting, Carl asked him, well, how does this stuff work? Nothing classified or anything like that. And the guy starts explaining the process to him. Then he suddenly stopped. And Carl said, he looked at me, and I could tell there was something going on. And the guy said, we discovered a base on the far side of the moon. And Carl went, what? You found a what? What is it, Russian? Well, obviously, not 1966. And the story went on from there. Now, look, several years ago, Carl was out riding his bicycle, and he was the victim of a hit-run driver. He subsequently died. Whoever the driver was never discovered. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was prosecuted. Some people think he was targeted. Now, I thought about that. Why would you target him after all these years? All right. What will be in it for anybody? I couldn't see it unless it was strictly an act of revenge. But who's to say? But anyway, he was one of the speakers there with Dan. So with that being said, let's bring Mr. Willis on, and we'll get to the heart of this matter. Dan, it is a distinct pleasure having you here. Thank you so much.
It's a distinct pleasure to join you, Don and Gerry. And looks like we have a number of military combat veterans on this panel here.
This is my hat right here. This is the one I wear.
This is my get attention when I'm at Walmart hat.
Oh,
I've got a foil hat, but I can't find it.
You can't find it.
yeah. Don and I are both Vietnam vets, and I was in the rivers of Vietnam, and Don was up north dealing with some heavy stuff going on up there.
Way up north.
Yeah, dear friend. It was very, very well said, Don, about Carl's testimony. Myself being an ex-ABC newsman, I remember him saying, and here it is, 30 years ago today, and I hope to hear it on the evening news. But you never heard it on the evening news. It all got fairly sanitized, the information. I was with Carl when I was hanging out in his hotel room in Hilton before we went to the National Press Club back here. Let's see, where is Carl? There he is. Let me get my positions right. There he is. And he was nervous as hell, to go before, he had 22 cameras in the mainstream media. The place was packed with reporters. And, it was, everybody was kind of shy doing this. So yeah, it's sad what happened, and I agree, Don. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you do something like that? Donna Hare, the lady who revealed that astronauts are sworn to secrecy what happened when they went to the moon in '69, and that they're airbrushing out the UFOs, as most of us know. She sent me a letter outside of normal internet channels, and said that she was having attempts against her life, and then she died of a fast-acting cancer.
Boy, it's amazing. Quite a few people have died from that fast-acting cancer. If I were a cynic, Dan, I would suggest, well, maybe somebody has a way to do that.
Oh yeah. They developed that stuff a long time ago. Heart attacks, I worked after when we were seeking to bring forth these scientists we had within these unacknowledged special access programs that could prove, put it on the table, show it working for an open congressional hearing that we had zero-point energy. We haven't needed nuclear and oil or coal for so many decades. The Bush administration, of course, denied the congressional hearing. So I volunteered. Dr. Greer set up a corporation. We had a database of about 300 scientists and inventors. And so for 10 years, I spent flying around the planet because of my technical background, vetting these scientists and inventors. Some were brilliant, but, it was like one horror story after another. Most received national security orders, which states that your invention has been deemed to be a detriment of the national security of the United States. Therefore, you cannot share it with anybody. Some were murdered, suicided, and some are delusional.
Well, if you're correct, and I don't know, okay, I've heard, believe me, Dan, as I'm sure you know, I have heard many stories in the last 35 years at UFO Magazine, doing my radio show, on those occasions when I've been out and speaking and what have you. But if we did have the technology available, Nikola Tesla, the 0 point, what would that do if it were incorporated into mainstream civilization across the planet? Who would suffer from that? Well, gee whiz, let's think. Oil and gas. Oh my golly, oil and gas, nuclear energy. Good heavens. If we could do away with all that, there'd be a heck of a lot of people out of work, wouldn't there?
Yeah, just imagine, I've worked with a lot of scientists. I know this stuff's real. I've seen it working. Stan Meyer, he had patents on everybody could retrofit their vehicles. In fact, there's new ways to do this that are even more efficient, where, we don't need gasoline. The nuclear power plants can be retrofitted with 0 point energy, and eventually get rid of the whole centralized power structure where every single home and business can have a little, not very big, little unit to give you multiple kilowatts to run your home or business. But, as you mentioned, there's sort of a multi-trillion-dollar interest that really, they don't really want to see that come out. But I don't think it's so much about, the trillions of dollars that they make. I think it's more about geopolitical control of the planet.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I have no doubt whatsoever. Well, let's get back to your incident when you were in the Navy and you were in communications. You were an electronics technician. That is correct?
No, I was a radioman.
Radio
communication. I had a top secret crypto level 14 with extra sensitive material handling security clearance. I worked at the busiest military communication facility on the planet in 1969 when I was, when I was a kid, I was in a ham radio. And so I talked to people all over the world in code, so I was a certified high-speed code operator. So they put me in charge of the code room, which was about a 20 by 20 foot room with 9 ship-to-shore circuits, and listening for the call letters. The NPG is our call sign, and then I have to run over there and put on the headphones and start typing out the message. One day, I took thousands of messages. This is not one of those things that you get all the time. This is kind of a rare thing. A U.S. Navy ship off the coast of Alaska, the crew visually witnessed off port bow a saucer about 70 feet in diameter. It was glowing reddish orange. It merged out of the ocean, shot straight up into space. The radar operator tracked it going over 7,000 miles per hour. This was classified as secret, priority level, going to Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C. I put in a request to the Chief of Naval Operations, through the Office of Naval Intelligence, to get a copy. I have the letter and everything, but they informed me that it had been destroyed So unlike the other witnesses, I felt my testimony is somewhat minor compared to what the other witnesses were disclosing. The 21 witnesses, which we were backed by over 500 military intelligence witnesses, and each one of us stated after we gave our testimony that we're willing to testify under oath, penalty of perjury, making national security oath. You didn't have the whistleblower protection like we do today back then. So yeah, I got a kind of an awakening when I realized that, like Carl's testimony about bases on the other side of the moon, Clifford Stone, another Vietnam vet who had ET experiences over in Vietnam.
Well, wait a minute. All these people, Dan, I knew very well. And Cliff, going back to the 80s, was at the time a genuine star when it came to disclosing obscure reports and manuals and stuff like that.
He was.
But I was out in the bush in Vietnam. I knew Cliff real well, and I got to tell you, I am not convinced that any of those Clifford Stone stories, and I'm just telling you from my standpoint, that any of them are legitimate. Okay, he sent a story with some of this daring do malarkey to UFO magazine. At the time, Bill Burns had come into the fold with Vicky and I. Burns wanted to run all of that, and I couldn't let it stand, not without counterpoints. And I wrote a counterpoint. The idea that he would go crawling out through the wire to meet his UFO contact in the middle of a war zone with VC and NVA running everywhere. Did you ever see Cliff? Well, obviously you did. This portly little guy, he smoked like a Marlboro commercial, okay, huffing and puffing all the time, and I just didn't buy it. Now, he retired from the Army. He was an SFC, a Sergeant First Class, E7. The fact that he never made E8 was amazing to me, but I've got his military records not 2.5 feet behind me. So I got to say, with Cliff, I'm very cynical and I'm very skeptical. So with that being said, please continue.
All right. I don't have direct information of the book that he had that detailed out the 57 different species that he said were categorized by 1989. So I have no concrete proof to, say yay or nay on that. But, the number of witnesses and the credibility, Captain Robert Salas, 10 nukes being shut down with red glowing UFO, rapid succession. You have so many different elements that, that were disclosed that day. I thought, my God, how is the public with this many cameras, this many reporters, how is this not going to be a world-changing event? People start asking a lot of questions. And so I started my education then. It's interesting if you look at the history of what brought about the 2001 event. It all started because of ever since Eisenhower, every president, CIA director, heads of intelligence, doesn't matter who you are, if you're not on the bigot list, you are denied access into these programs that are reverse engineering extraterrestrial craft.
With the possible exception of George H.W. Bush.
Right. With the possible exception, right. Yeah, he was deep in the thick of it. And so, Carter had an experience, and George H.W. Bush denied him access because he actually made it as a campaign promise to, reveal this to the public. And then, Clinton, who, Sarah McClendon, the little lady sitting here in the front row who actually sponsored this event, she was a famed White Horse correspondent, asked him, why aren't you, disclosing? He said, Sarah, there's a secret government in the government, and I don't control it. And so he tried to have a CIA director, James Woolsey, look into the matter. The CIA director was denied access. And so, unable to get information through his military intelligence channels, he brought in Dr. Stephen Greer, who was the director for the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, a civilian.
Well, that was immediately following, several years previously, the meetings held in D.C. at the Pentagon with Greer was there, Billy Cox, the Sarasota reporter, was there. Edgar Mitchell was there.
Now, you're thinking April 1997,
right?
Don. This was back in '93.
Oh, excuse
Yeah.
me. I thought you were talking after 2001. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. No, and so Dreher brought a whole bunch of substantiating documentation. The words out of the director's mouth was, I know the subject's real, and try to figure out where the hell I can't gain access, And so Greer, becoming aware of the gravity of the situation, he met with some military advisors who told him to start collecting witnesses. So I was like the 100th videotape witness out of the 500 witnesses that were collected between 1993 and 2001. Interestingly, in 1993, ever since my two questions came to mind when I had the 1969 report from the ship coming in. One, obviously the government is aware of the presence of the extraterrestrials. And two, why, if the extraterrestrials are here, why aren't they making themselves revealed to the public? So these two questions were in my mind. So over the decades, I tried to look for answers. And I heard in '93, the first time Bob Lazar was willing to meet with a group of researchers outside of Area 51, I traveled there. No recordings were allowed whatsoever. I was sitting in the front row with my camcorder on. I uploaded it to YouTube on the webmatrix.net 1993 timeline. You check it out. So he was getting hit with 2 hours of nonstop questions by some pretty savvy researchers. What happened was the base kind of freaked out, Nellis base, and they sent out an NRO classified advisory warning all base personnel to avoid this group and everything. And this document had a distribution list of unacknowledged special access programs like Magi Ops, Cosmic Ops, like what Lazar was working on.
Right.
And so somehow Greer got a hold of this document. I don't know how that came about, but he, as you mentioned, in April of '97, Greer went with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, and Commander Will Miller to meet with the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson. The admiral tried to look into it. He was not only denied access, like everybody else has been ever since Eisenhower, but he was threatened to drop the matter immediately, or he'd see an early retirement and lose rank. So he was mad as hell, as you can imagine, with him in his constitutional level of authority to be denied access into this program. So he told Dr. Greer, if you can get your people willing to testify under oath, because he knew he's been collecting them since '93, you have my permission to go to the mainstream media with this and expose this group. This group is illegal, he said. And so that's what greenlighted this 2001 event, which Greer, I understand, he had his life threatened not to do it, but he courageously, went ahead. But it doesn't matter if you have 500 witnesses or 5,000 or 10,000 witnesses. If you have control of the mainstream media and know how to do what's called a limited hangout, the public won't be any more aware of anything other than we are not alone, and they want to have congressional hearings on. They believe people have had UFO experiences and so forth, and this is how they played it.
Well, let's flash forward right now with what is happening with these congressional hearings. Now, as I told you, Dan, my background was in law enforcement. I was a criminal investigator. And so, in other words, I know how to conduct an investigation. I know what you're supposed to do. I know what you must do. You're trying to come to a conclusion about, in this matter, what the heck is actually going on. But back then, what's the deal behind this crime? Well, you know what I noticed? That none of these hearings have provided any background in what has happened in this field. My God, just the last 30 years, okay? Which sounds like a long time until you blew through 30 years as quickly as we have, okay? No background on, nobody has mentioned anything about these nuclear base overflights, bent waters, all these solace with those missiles being shut down. The deaths that have happened back in the 50s, in the early to mid 50s, hey, we were losing a lot of jets. And at the time, their mandate was to try to chase these things down. And as a result, some of those pilots got pretty aggressive. And the bottom line was, if they got too aggressive, they got slapped aside. And that's happened. When the Soviet Union collapsed and we started opening up with the Russians, primarily the Russians, and a lot of them started to come over here. I had the opportunity, and as a matter of fact, I got her on TV, her first American television program, retired Red Air Force Colonel Dr. Marina Popovich. Now, Popovich was quite a lady. She was one of the premier Soviet pilots. She was compared to General Chuck Yeager as being the Russian Chuck Yeager. And her ex-husband was Pavel Popovich, a general officer in the Red Air Force and the first cosmonaut to rendezvous with another spaceship in orbit back in '62. So, I mean, these were high-powered people. And she told me that they had lost aircraft all across, and the Soviet Union at its height was a huge, huge country all over the country. They had tried, just like we did for a long time, to get these things down. And as a result, they lost pilots. So, you know, this is, nobody has mentioned any of this in these updated hearings. Nobody has mentioned how the United States Air Force has totally stonewalled this thing, going all the way back to the Condon Committee report. The Air Force has been mum. It's the Navy that has done most of the talking, and to a certain extent, even the freaking CIA. So, you know, there's a hell of a lot of questions to be asked, and Dan, nobody is asking them.
Oh, we need more people asking more questions. You know, Soviet intelligence reports that more than half of the UFOs coming in and out of our planet are coming out of the oceans.
Yes.
Which makes sense. You know, there's not very many people to see what's going on. Yeah, nobody mentions about the entire aircraft fleet of Admiral Byrd Operation High Jump being wiped out completely. A lot of things aren't mentioned. You know, it's interesting, the Senate UFO UAP, they call it.
Well, that's
now.
that's the problem. The public is totally ignorant of this.
Oh, it's not their fault. They've been indoctrinated. I've been researching this stuff for a long time.
Yeah, you and I were talking about this before the show.
Yeah, Nazi Germany had a plan before the end of the war. They called it Weltanschauungskrieg, worldview warfare. They planned to infiltrate into the United States and create a matrix of perception. And they effectively did. They rewrote the history of World War II in 1946, working with the Rockefellers. The Operation Mockingbird in 1950, they controlled the media. They infiltrated in, as you know, with paperclip and NASA, pharmaceuticals, so forth and so on. So, they've kept it secret. That's why people at NASA say there's like Donna Harris says, I don't know how they do it. She was working there for 20 years. Some people know there's this other aspect of NASA that's totally secret, while there's this front of NASA. It's a very, very expensive props. We haven't needed rocket propulsion. The Nazis developed it back in 1934. We didn't have it until about October of 1954. So we haven't needed, it's kept our planet technologically hijacked. And that's how, ever since the Invention Secrecy Act 1951, all these national security orders, over 6,000 inventions, across the field, medical, anti-gravity, free energy, all these things have been the secret system within the patent office that sends up a red flag if anybody's got something that could possibly jeopardize the status quo of our current civilization.
Well, the thing about NASA that I never have gotten over is how Wernher von Braun today is idolized. Okay.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is von Braun was an SS colonel,
right,
in charge of prisoners and Jews that they forced to work slave labor, created the V2 rocket that they rained all over Great Britain, okay, killing thousands of innocent civilians. We grab him up at the end of the war so the Russians won't grab him up and his buddies, bring him back, whitewash his history, and then they trot him out. Hell, even Walt Disney, okay? Even Walt Disney did stuff with von Braun. Everybody totally unaware of the fact that this guy was a freaking unrepentant Nazi.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That bothers me, Dan.
No, he was on Truman's list of being an ardent Nazi and being a threat to the national security. But, Alan Dulles, who was infamous for the Nazi infiltration, they had all their paperwork rewritten and stuff. And, the Nazis worked with the Vatican and secret societies, and Disney was a 33rd degree. And, they did this thing back in the mid 50s, it was like, oh, we're going to go to moon and Mars on rockets and stuff like that. He knew full well, him and his mentor, Professor Herman Oberth, that they had figured that they figured out the torsion physics, and you don't need rocket fuel, to overcome gravity. And so this was all like an expensive prop psyop in order to keep us kind of like a Truman Show kind of reality, that we're at a certain level, that we need to use gasoline, we need to use rockets to go into space, and so forth and so on. They've kept us technologically retarded while they have advanced in their secret space program, which, they were building down in Antarctica, and which they had 29 Navy spies reporting to Admiral Rico Boda, where my father was working coincidentally in the early 40s at the Naval Air Station San Diego. and they were, as William Tompkins was an information disseminator, giving it to, Boeing and not Boeing, McDonnell Douglas and some universities and stuff. We're trying to catch up. They have this advanced technology, as obviously, Admiral Byrd found out. And so that's what we were trying to do. And it's interesting, the Galactic Federation of Worlds back in February 1954 met with Eisenhower. And
are you talking about the meeting
Murdoch
at
base?
Murdoch Field?
Murdoch Field, right.
Where Eisenhower later said that he had, or his press people said he had a dental emergency.
Right. There were some people that were there that witnessed this.
Gerald Light was one of them.
Right. And Gerald said it was his conviction that Eisenhower was going to go on radio and television and reveal this to the world in about May of 1954. This was in February, right? But what happened in May of 54? They started the Bilderberg meetings instead. And what happened?
It's amazing too. And this is just a little off-field thing, but immediately following 54, around 56, 57, guess which new bit of technology made its first appearance? Lasers.
Oh, right. As Colonel Corso, revealed a lot of.
Where did these come from?
Right. Yeah, there was somebody else at that meeting with Eisenhower too. That Cardinal Francis McIntyre. Everybody was sworn to secrecy, right? Immediately, he flies to the Pope and spills the whole beans, and the Pope sets up this secret intelligence agency, for the Vatican, and they've had their mitts into this. A media company wanted me to write an article on media control, and I gladly accept it, because I wanted to figure out what the hell happened back then. We had 22 cameras, we got all these witnesses, right? And so I gladly accept it. And the only way I could figure out how to wrap my head around this situation was to lay it out in a chronology from the beginning of the 20th century to present day, and start reading all these different authenticated classified documents and all these different witness testimonies. And after a while, when you start to gather enough information, not to say that you have the full complete picture by any means, but it starts to form a high probability of what's been hidden behind the scenes, which isn't what we were taught in school, that's for sure. In fact, it's so bizarre, it sounds like the most incredible science fiction movie ever, that it actually keeps its own best secrecy, because it does sound
well. Someday this may make one hell of a science fiction movie.
Oh, well, yeah, we're in the movie right now.
Yes,
so.
yes, we are.
Where was I going with that? Yeah, what happened was the Galactic Federation of Worlds offered some stuff. They wanted us to release our nuclear weapons, which the group didn't, the generals and everything really weren't into doing that. The corporations. And so what happened was Alan Dulles, who was set up for the next MJ-12 group, the original one was set up with Truman, with Admiral Roscoe Hillenkotter as MJ-1, who warned about the dangers of secrecy regarding the UFO matter. He was spot on.
And surprisingly, Hillenkotter was a classmate of Major Donald Kehoe, USMC, retired. Okay, Kehoe, one of the premier investigators and authors during this period of time, and the man who basically took over the reins of the National Investigative Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, around 55, 56, and brought Hillenkotter on the board of NICAP. And he was one of the people that they tried at that time. This is years before Condon, that at that time they were trying to get support for a congressional hearing on this.
Keyhole was great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they helicopter. Well, they named one of the Solar Warren spacecraft after him, along with LeMay, who was in part of the second MJ-12 group. And so what happened was when the new MJ-12 group, which is all the a lot of the cabal members, I guess you could say, with Alan Dulles as head, MJ-1, they basically circumvented Eisenhower. The Galactic Federation tried to warn him against the Orion group that was trying to cut a deal. See, the Galactic Federation wasn't willing to give us, advanced technology until we developed a little bit better to be able to handle it. But the Nibu group was willing to give some technology, and they liked that. And so what they did was they basically sold out our civilization by allowing them to abduct people for their hybrid program. We gave them underground facilities, and they, like they warned, they completely reneged on our agreements, and they abducted millions of people instead.
Now, a lot of this is very provocative. You're making some provocative statements, and
It's
my
a provocative
question,
history.
well, believe me, Dan, I am not arguing that. When you talk about things like the Galactic Confederation and the Orion Group, okay, most people are not familiar with that. What is the basis for those things?
A good question. Let me give you a definition. The Galactic Federation of Worlds is different civilizations across the galaxy that have entered into an alliance, you could say, that there are, contrary to Dr. Greer's belief that all extraterrestrials are benevolent and only nefarious elements are here on this planet, which is the one major thing that I don't fully agree with.
Oh, Greer and I had a very heated discussion about that very thing. This is back circa around 1990 or 91. Greer called my wife, who was the publisher, and myself, the director of research for UFO Magazine, wanted to meet us, wanted to have lunch with us. So we agreed. I had heard of Dr. Stephen Greer. He doesn't use the doctor much anymore, but the Dr. Stephen Greer, an emergency room physician. Okay, great. So we meet downtown in Los Angeles. Very congenial man. He was very polite, very upbeat, what have you. We start talking about this. Now, my background is probably a hell of a lot darker than Greer's background. The military, Vietnam. I worked for a while undercover as a police officer. I was a criminal investigator. And I had just, at that time, finished an article for UFO Magazine detailing quite a few events where people, citizens, just people like you and I, had encounters with UFOs and were seriously hurt or injured. And this wasn't even taking into account military situations between military aircraft and these objects. So I mentioned this to Greer, and he took a lot of umbrage at that. And he said, look, I can tell you as an emergency room physician that sometimes they'll bring somebody into the emergency room, and I've got to do things that physically hurt the patient in order to help them. And I said, Stephen, look,
Mm-mm.
People that are trying to help you don't invade your bedroom at 3 or 4 in the morning, purportedly, take you out of there, stick probes up you, okay, do all this other material that people are claiming, and then send you back with not so much as a buy your leave. Well, Greer decided then and there he didn't like us. So, hey, I could go a lot further into this. I'm not going to. We at one point in the mid 90s did an issue of UFO magazine called Cults or Cutting Edge. And at that time, Greer's organization was CSETI. Okay. And we were talking about the Billy Meyer thing. We were talking about the George Green thing. There were a lot of people in there. Sean David Morton. There were a lot of people in there that we had mentioned. And in passing, we mentioned CSETI. And the next thing you know, Joe Burks, another doctor who at that time was Greer's wingman, wrote me a 15-page letter.
Whoa.
15 pages, okay? Handwritten, I might add. And so I read this, and his thing was, look, you guys have us all wrong. I want to debate you. Let's have a debate on CompuServe. And at that time, CompuServe was a big thing. You would go on there, go on a forum, and then you'd type at each other. And I turned to Vicky and I said, why in the hell would I debate him on CompuServe? I've got a bloody radio show. So I invited him on the show. 2 hours later, Burks, he went screaming out of the studio. Okay, they were so hot and pissed off. Well, look, if you can't stand any scrutiny, my friend, you're in the wrong business. And that was the problem. And then we started getting sniped at, primarily from CSETI. So I got to tell you right up front, Dan, I've got, from years ago, granted, but I've got a sour taste in my mouth about those guys.
Well, I asked Dr. Greer in the year 2000, I said, what about the reptilians? Because I've heard stories, eating children underground, all kinds of different stories, right? He says, "Oh, they're sweet." That was his response. So,
okay.
Yeah, this goes in. I don't know if we have enough time for the top of the hour, but this is an important topic.
Well, let me check real quick.
How much 2 more minutes? We have
2 minutes. Okay.
Oh, well, I was going to discuss whenever there's a narrative out that is obviously can be proven incorrect, it's usually there's an agenda behind it. And so once we go past the top of the hour, we'll get into that a little bit more. But I just wanted to finish off the Galactic Federation of Worlds, since there are some badass little bastards out there in the universe. They have gathered together and formed an alliance that is, what they put out in Star Trek about the Prime Directive is actually a real thing, where they don't interfere with lesser evolving until they all seek a balance. They're not going to come in and save anybody, but they if one group has an advanced race like the Draco reptilians intervened with, like, say, Nazi Germany to give them some advanced technology, then that would give them kind of a ticket to work secretly with the U.S. Navy to develop their solar warden program. So they always try to seek balance, kind of like not really. It's not really apparent to the public, but it's working behind the scenes.
I'll tell you what, when we save that for when we come back, but when we come back, the first thing I want to do is give a very brief overview of what I have been told, okay, in 30 plus years of inhabiting this fish pond concerning alleged alien groups and what the bottom line is. And part of it comes, believe it or not, from Ingo Swann, the man who designed the protocols for the Stargate program. Ingo was a friend of mine. God, we lost a heck of a guy when he passed on a few years ago. Okay, well, let's go ahead, take that top of the hour break. Chanel, go ahead and pop us out of here. And boy, we have a lot more with Dan when we get back. And hopefully Mark and Gary are still in studio. Are you still there, Gary?
I'm totally here.
Okay.
Hi guys, this is Gary from Pop Culture Minefield here on KGRA, and we're leaving for our first break. I hope we survive.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Behind every folded flag is a family. When American lives are lost in defense of our freedom, TAPS is there to help the friends and families of those who have served and died. TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for survivors. We provide help, hope, and healing every day. Visit us online at TAPS.org or call 1-800-959-TAPS.
Are you looking to go on a faraway journey that is magical and mysterious, reaping on mystical legends? If so, then Mysterious Adventure Tours is perfect for you. Imagine a voyage to explore ancient mysteries of Ireland, haunted majesties of Scotland, or their chilling Birth of the Vampires in Romania. These small esoteric getaways are limited and do fill up fast. So, go to mysteriousAdventuretours.com and book your trip soon.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Oh wow, we survived! Welcome back from the commercial break. Now for some more Pop Culture Minefield on KGRA.
Oh, I noticed during the break, did we lose Mark?
Yeah, Mark wasn't feeling well and decided to go lie down.
Okay. Well,
everybody's
sorry
getting hit by this bug, man. I mean, Vicky, God, she got it.
She got it, but she was over it basically quickly. In a day.
Anna's been sick for like a week. So it just sucks, man. These lower GI bugs. Ugh. Yeah. Probably the goddamn reptilians giving it to us.
I know it. You can never trust those reptilians.
Sons of bitches. And Dan is back.
We are back. We did survive the break, and by golly, we're back. Okay, I want to get back to Dan, but I just wanted to say very quickly that golly, I guess it's 35 years that I've been doing this as a profession. at UFO Magazine especially, we interfaced with everybody you can imagine. From the Pentagon, we covered Reagan's Star Wars initiative to got a couple of stories that I was instrumental in breaking that definitely had a military connotation to it. STS-48. I broke that on NBC and then CNN. And the Phobos 2 incident in Mars orbit that basically encountered a huge unknown.
Huge.
And huge, that ended up being destroyed. The probe was destroyed by this thing. And that's not coming from me. That was coming from Glav Cosmos. So anyway, the one thing that I've been told is there are at least 7 different groups of, for the want of a better term, visitors. Now, normally back in the day, I would have said extraterrestrials. We don't know that today, okay? Because my thinking has changed in those 35 years. Originally, it was strictly nuts and bolts. Then, as things progressed, I began to entertain the idea that there very likely was an interdimensional connection to this. And if you think about it, and if you really put your thinking hat on, that might have been one of the reasons, especially in the 50s, a lot of contactees claimed that the quote-unquote Space Brothers, okay, continuously warned us about nuclear weapons. Well, we were setting the damn things off willy-nilly then. Not just the little pipsqueaks like we used during the war on Japan, but really big ones, okay? And maybe they were shaking the foundation of the universe interdimensionally, all right? And those sentient beings on the other side of the interdimensional divide weren't happy about that. And there is one other possibility that I've basically considered. That was my bagel, Dan. That was the bagel. The other one is, what if 12,000 roughly years ago, 12,000 years ago, our planet underwent a dramatic event, which today is called the Younger Dryas event. Okay, the ice caps basically melted. The oceans rose 200 to 400 feet in depth, rose, which ate up a lot of land that previously had been available. What if there had been a human civilization that was advanced, that could see whatever it was that happened coming, and they got the hell off the planet for a while? We could be in many regards, we could be dealing with ancient relatives of ours that are still much more advanced than we are. Well, with that being said, these groups of visitors coming here were broken down into several types. Number one, there were a couple of groups that were told to me as being totally benign. There were other groups that came that were friendly toward the human race, but there was one group, and they were never identified as being totally antithetical toward the human race. Well, Ingo Swann and I, one night, we were having dinner out here in Burbank at an Italian restaurant, and I was pumping Swann about his book, Penetration. And in there, of course, was the famous incident where he was sequestered by an extremely black covert intelligence agency. He thinks they were, although he did say, help. Excuse me, for all I know, maybe they were aliens. But they wanted me to do a remote viewing session for them. Ultra top secret, paid him $1,000 a day, made sure he had his favorite cigars. They put a hood over his head, took him to a secret location, and he ended up remotely viewing the moon. And lo and behold, he discovered an alien base on the far side. This is what he reported. And everything was hunky-dory until they noticed they were being watched.
Yeah,
and
they saw him.
It shocked him, so badly that he was literally knocked out of that session. Then he told me for the next 4 to 6 months, he was afraid they were going to track him down and fry his brain. This is what he told me. And I said, why, Ingo? Why? He said, well, they regard human telepathy or sight talent as a threat. Now, we all have it to some degree. I know I do. I used it when I was a cop. Although at the time, I didn't call it that. It was my gut instinct.
Right.
That's how I referred to it. But
yeah,
Dan,
I remember
what do
that
you think
incident
about
with
that?
Ego Swan. Yeah, he got terrified when they could see him. Yep, your audio went out, Don.
Okay. How's that? Is that better?
It really reminds me, because when Don and I talked about this before, it reminds me of the Nietzsche statement about be careful looking into the abyss. It's scary to me. This whole thing is scary.
Sometimes the abyss will have a propensity to look back at you. Dan, what's your feelings on what I just said?
Well, as our friend Carl saw, there's bases on the far side of the moon, and as William Tompkins, who was working at TRW at the time, where the live feed, not the one that got censored to the public, he saw the huge, there were reptilian craft lined up along the far edge of the crater, and we were warned off the moon. That's why they only finished a few more missions, and that was it. So yeah, the moon was fully occupied, and what I wanted to pick up where we left off on the last conversation. You were asking about the definition of the Galactic Federation of Worlds and also the Orion Group, or sometimes called the NIBU. The Galactic Federation of Worlds, rather, they're benevolent in the sense that they all work to support each other. It's kind of like not exactly like NATO, but something of that idea that there's an alliance that if anyone gets attacked, that they all use their resources, to get the bastard. There was two major threats. There was the Draco. There was the reptilians of the Sakaar Empire, which have a huge empire across the galaxy that have been operating in our planet for thousands of years, operating underground. You've got the Orion Group, which is the Greys, that do the abduction. That there was this Draco Nibu alliance that was working with the Nazis that during the time of Eisenhower back around 1955 were somewhat of a surrender agreement had to be made. The Nibu is kind of almost like in Star
What
Trek.
Agreement?
Huh? It was
what kind of an agreement?
A surrender type of agreement. They had advanced technology. They were 20 years ahead of us. So anyway, it's kind of a complex story. So let me explain. You have you have, it's almost like in Star Trek where you have the Klingons, are kind of like the reptilians, and the Borg, which is like nothing but a simulate. That particular race operates like a hive mind, like like insects do, where there's like a queen that they all share the same mind, and so their objective was to try to circumvent the prime directive and do this hybrid program that they were doing underground. We gave them, bases like Dulce and so forth. And it was a way to kind of work around the prime directive. But since that time, the prime directive has had an amendment to it so that they can't do that anymore. But since that, in 2021, the reptilians and the grays have been removed from our solar system. And this has been confirmed by a U.S. Navy think tank called the Arlington Group, headed by John Peterson, who got 3 independent sources that the regressive extraterrestrials, these reptilians and these grays, have been removed from our solar system. And that right now we've got a much better situation than we had previously, because you had I guess you'd say the deep state had their extraterrestrial overlords, so they're sort of without their higher command, so to speak, to be able to tap resources from. And so right now they're the deep state's basically in their process of getting exposed.
You're referring to what has been described as the swamp back in Washington?
The swamp. The swamp and beyond, yeah. And so what has happened is the Galactic Federation of Worlds has delivered to General Van Herk, who's head of North American Air Command and connected with the Earth Alliance, who's been working with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and they have worked to clear out of our solar system on the Moon, Mars, Ceres, and elsewhere, so that they have been purged out of our system. And a disclosure plan is currently being activated, where we will start to see more of their ships and start to acclimate the public.
Well, two things,
presence.
Dan. Two things. Number one, I have a very, very dear friend who is a physicist who basically he worked in the Department of Defense, and he was a part of the 1996 Clementine mission that went back and totally rephotographed the moon again. Okay. Millions and millions of photographs, which to me at the time seemed counterproductive, unless you consider, just like in the military, they were looking for changes. Now, how in the world would you look for changes on the moon unless somebody was there? Okay, that's number one. Number two, and this individual, by the way, told me he personally believes that we do have a secret advanced space program. That's number one. Number two, often if I were watching the ISS, the International Space Station, they have a live feed on there.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have we witnessed what appeared to be some huge ships moving into camera range, and suddenly the feed is lost?
Right, like 30 of them.
Yeah. What
I
do you
remember seeing that?
What is your opinion about that? Are these the ships that you're referring to, do you think?
Yeah, they're letting you know we're here. They're here, the Galactic Federation of Worlds, as the head of the Israeli space program is mentioning about that, and talking about the bases on Mars and so forth. What what's interesting is that this whole disclosure plan will start to unravel as we start to see there's some laws coming out where these corporations that have been reverse engineering the ET craft and have this advanced technology and so forth, they have a new law that's, there's of course there's backlash on this, that anyone working with advanced extraterrestrial technology is going to have the public release it, or else their funding is going to get cut. And as you know, everything's driven by money. So there's probably a good chance that a lot of this is going to start to get exposed into the public awareness. And I think it's going to be, it's not going to be like boom, it's like the whole story. It's going to be like a drip, drip, drip type of thing. And eventually it's going to, people start asking more questions, become more acclimated, until eventually it's going to lead to contact.
This is what you and I talked about earlier, though, Dan, that Hollywood has been in league with the government, it seems, for decades of making films that really touches on the fringe of all of this, including not the film, but the documentary about the making of the film, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And then later, Kubrick himself has made allusions. It's really weird, that there's that possibility, starting all the way back with not even mentioning Thing from Another World, but Day the Earth Stood Still touched on all those subjects.
Well, I interviewed Robert Wise,
a great director,
extensively about that film, and he was basically he with the exception of the this is what he told me. So, we're talking about what, 1951 or thereabout, the day the Earth stood still.
It was the second major UFO film.
Yes. He assured me the only government involvement they had was getting access to military equipment from the State Guard or the National Guard, or maybe it was the Army Reserves, the tanks and the cars and, all that stuff that they had toward the end of the film when they were chasing Klaatu around and shooting him down. So, but because I was curious, I said, look, at this time in history, the UFO thing was all over everything, all media. It was in the newspapers, newsreels, that kind of stuff. Of course, TV was just brand spanking new then. But I wanted to find out if he were aware of any influence, like the government would have sent in advisors, if you will. Now, have they done that? Absolutely. I did a two-part interview with Chase Brandon, a few years ago. And Chase Brandon was just retiring from the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. He was the CIA liaison to Hollywood. And the reason his name popped up was he allegedly had discovered in an unsecure location at CIA a document or memo talking about the Roswell event. Now, I don't know if you guys will recall this. At the time, there was a minor media frenzy about that. And after my two-part interview with Brandon, sometime later, might have been a couple of months, something was happening with North Korea. And I thought to myself, golly, this would be a great guy to get to come on. And I had his home phone number. So I said, hell, I'm going to give him a call. So I did. I called him up and I said, Chase, this is Don Ecker. And hey, I'd love to have you back on Dark Matters Radio and talk about what's happening in North Korea. He said, look, he said, normally I'd love to, but after our last interview, I had a visit here at the house. So he was not real up on coming back on the radio because apparently somebody at CIA chewed his ass after listening to our broadcast. So there's that. So just so you know, Dan, we're being observed right now. I have no doubt about it, none whatsoever. So yeah,
no doubt about it. Yes, I agree. Yeah, it was interesting. I got, right after we did this in 2001, I was on CNN. CBS did a special assignment team from LA, came down, CBS 2. And I told them, don't even bother coming down, because unless I can say that we have these scientists with any unacknowledged programs that have the 0-point energy, could solve the energy problem, I'm not going to do this interview, because I saw what CNN and the rest of the networks did. So they promised up and down they were going to do it. And so they interviewed me for about 45 minutes.
Checks in the mail, and I will not come in your mouth. Yes, I know.
Oh my God.
Right. And afterward, the producer, she got a little education that, she's, I never had this happen before. The higher executives, and we know who the higher executives are, made me cut that part out, which was a little 10-second segment that I said. And so, I became aware, that the higher executives working with the intelligence agencies are very much, this is like up on the high list of concern to make sure it gets sanitized.
Yeah. The fix is in, so to speak.
Exactly. So we got a super chat here from Ariel Bellet. I work for the government, and then I sell those secrets to our enemies. How else do you think I make my money? Thanks for the $5 super chat, Ariel.
Yeah, you're being monitored.
We are watching you.
Oh, they used to frequently monitor us, surveil us. Hell, I've caught, this is back in the 90s before we bought our home here. We were living down in the small town of Sunland. It's here in the San Fernando Valley. And we were doing, well, actually two things. I was doing a lot of TV. I was being interviewed for TV shows frequently. And I was doing my radio show, which was very, very popular, and the magazine. So we were talking about things, a lot of things that the powers that be were not happy about. And I've discovered vans parked just a little down the street surveilling our house. Now, they probably had electronic gathering devices too, I have no doubt. And I got to tell you, as an American military veteran, a combat veteran, and as a former police officer, I find that highly disturbing. And it's worse today than it's ever been. There are cameras everywhere. My God, they can practically, if they want, the powers that be, they can watch you from the time you leave your house until you get back and know every move you make.
And don't forget their use of our personal devices.
Oh, yeah.
It gets even worse. Yeah, I wanted to talk about agendas. We were talking in the previous hour about, I see different agendas. One I call the alien threat, right? And you see that a lot. Well, that's not really a true anymore. If indeed the regressive threatening extraterrestrials have been removed from our solar system back in 2021, that wouldn't be really real. But as we disclosed, that Werner von Braun spilled the beans on this plan they had, the next one in line was going to be terrorists, which happened 4 months later on 9/11, with the final one being the hoaxed alien event And, that could serve for something along that line. And then you have the other narrative, which is all the ETs are good. We know who does that. And who else does that? The Vatican. Back in 2008, they said, the extraterrestrials have not been born on our planet, so they're free of original sin, so they're our brother, they're all benevolent, there's nothing lower than that's what's on Earth, And so, going back to, many documents that I've looked at, authenticated documents like 1952, where the Cardinal Francis Spellman, which was the head for the Vatican, I think in New York, he was meeting with the head of the Defense Department of War at that time, is what they were called, that the Vatican wanted to have containment of the UFO issue. And they had an actual war plan set up in case mass sightings ever occurred. That's in one of the Majestic 12 meeting reports. And so for a long time, they wanted to keep this secret. Well, why would you want to not reveal that there are nefarious negative extraterrestrials? Well, it could be that they don't want to expose what our government did back in the mid-50s to sell us out, and the operations that have been operating underground with some of these regressive extraterrestrials, and what they have been doing with human trafficking off planet. And there's a lot of links in together, as you search through history, you'll see that, the Vatican gave the Nazis all passports and everything through the rat lines, allowed them to escape through South America and so forth. And, and they started their drug operations, which George H.W. Bush with his Zapata oil company was very instrumental in helping.
And so was Bill Clinton in Arkansas when he was governor.
Right. Yeah, they used to go hunting together, I understand.
CIA would fly in drugs and they would fly out weapons.
Yeah, just like Greer's recent 2023, he had one witness that some Marines, they saw anti-gravitic craft fly down in the middle of the jungle, and there was humans were being trafficking, weapons and drugs. And these people were out, no name tags, no insignia, branch or anything like that. They were equipped with the best. And, these poor Marines were, scared for their lives. But, in Vietnam, we had a captain friend of mine would see the drugs being shipped off. And there's a lot of stories about that. But
out of the Golden Triangle?
Yeah, the Golden Triangle. So, so whenever there's a narrative and there's indications that it's not true, there's usually an agenda behind it. I've been in contact with one of the beings of the Galactic Federation of Worlds through a friend of mine I was telling you about. Her name is Lena Danan, who got abducted when she was 9 years old, and they had to repurpose the implant that the Greys put in her. They use like these quantum communication devices, so it doesn't use electromagnetics like we use. It's quantum communication where you can be on another galaxy and communicate.
Spooky action at a distance.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that.
Well, that's what.
Yeah, Einstein. Yeah. And so, I had an ET experience back in 1977 that led me. It had to do with geometry and consciousness and crystals, and so I had seeking out Dr. Marcel Vogel, who set up a lab after he retired from IBM. So I was working with him and medical doctors. And so she had me on a show, and we started to talk about the usual disclosure stuff. And she says, well, you used to work with Dr. Vogel on crystals. I said, well, her contact, his name's Thorhan Aredion. His younger brother is going to a university in the Pleiades and learning how to terraform planets. And he knows a little bit about crystals. And so, we could ask him some questions. So since April of last year, for over a year now, I've been having this communication dialogue through her implant. And we got about 117 pages of question and answer. And it blew us away what the information he was given, because much of what was substantiated with Dr. Vogel in the laboratory, he complemented and went far beyond that. In fact, he's giving the technology plans for the energy devices that they use on their planet Era. And so I have two highly qualified science teams that are assembling this, totally independently. And it's kind of a complex arrangement of quartz crystal that's cut in a specific geometries. And then you have coils around it that are in silver and copper that are going perpendicular, that are pulsed in a particular way at a particular frequency that creates a torsion field within the crystal lattice that releases this frill energy, which they're able to convert into electrical power. But, after 10 years of nightmares, I'm not doing anything, and just for all the agencies listening out there, I'm not doing anything with power production, right? This is kind of the frill is what they call it. It's like a life force of the universe. It's like a beneficial energy. It'll heal the body. It'll help plants grow like crazy and so forth. So we're going to be able to measure this, and I'm going to present this in October in Orlando, Florida, to this conference that I don't do conferences. I just do talk shows once in a while online, but and I hate flying. But since we're going to be able to bring these scientists and quantitatively measure this, so it's not just words, we're actually able to measure and quantify this to give credibility to the information that we've been receiving. So that's currently what I've been working on.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan. This is part of one of the reasons I wanted to have you on as a guest today. I wanted to get your readout on this, and I don't mean to be flippant, but this dog and pony show congressional hearings on UFO disclosure. Now, I and Gary will tell you, I gave him part of this paper I am writing about why I believe disclosure will never happen. Not true disclosure. Maybe a dog and pony disclosure, but from everything,
most people couldn't handle the full truth.
Well, you see, that's what I'm getting at. What most people do not realize is that the upper echelon of the intelligence people in this nation today, and military, and I'm talking about high Pentagon, Joint Chiefs levels, these people are aware that what we're dealing with, this phenomenon, has a core secret at the very center of it, a core secret that is protected by an SAP, a special access program. Now, what that means is, unless you are on the so-called bigot list, now the bigot list is a list that identify people that are read into the program. Now, earlier on in the show, we were talking about Admiral Thomas Wilson, who allegedly flew. He denies this, of course, but if this is true, all right, he must deny it, or he would be in violation of federal statute. That this bigot list identifies the people that are allowed to be to access parts of this. I don't think there's anybody that has the full picture of this. Everybody may have a piece or a part of it, but that the upper echelon of the military, I was told, is so terrified that this core secret would be revealed, it has them quaking in their boots. Now, I've been watching what's been going on. David Grouch, for example. Now, a lot of people saw his testimony. They got all hot and bothered, excited. Okay. But even he said that he didn't have any firsthand knowledge of any of this. This was all material he was given. He was told about, secondhand at best. And with that being said, you know, a lot of congressmen got their mug on the tube, got their face on television, harumphing about this business, UFOs, etc. But hey, it's been there for everybody to see for over 75 freaking years. Okay. All you had to do was look to understand that the government basically have been keeping us in the mushroom syndrome. You know what that is, right? They keep you in the dark and they feed you copious amounts of bullshit. That's the bottom line about what the American public has been dealing with for over 75 years, talking about UFOs. Dan, what do you say to that?
Well, yeah, and it's compartmentalized, so much that members of Congress they're temporary. No, it's people like Admiral Wilson and his high level authority, like you mentioned, not being on the bigot list and even being threatened. But as you and I mentioned earlier, he met at the EG&G building with astrophysicist Dr. Eric Davis, and he recorded the conversation, and it got transcribed, and all of a sudden, all is about working with technology not of this earth, and how he was threatened to drop it, and that the corporations, wouldn't allow him in because he wasn't on, like you said, the bigot list. And this got leaked after Dr. Edgar Mitchell passed away, and he had to have a copy of it. So, and so the cat's out of the bag, regardless of what the head of intelligence says, or just like James Woolsey, said, "Oh, Greer misconstrued," and blah 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 blah, and you had to have an official letter to, deny the whole.
Well,
thing.
Greer was claiming for a long time he was briefed by Woolsey at a dinner party, and Woolsey and his party, his wife, and there was another couple there, wrote a letter, public letter, stating that this was not an accurate rendition of what happened.
Right.
That Greer just basically walked up and introduced himself, and hey,
and distorted the facts, and right. Of course, of course they have to say that. But there's too much evidence, when you have so many witnesses. I mean, it gets kind of ludicrous, just like there obviously is a base on the other side of the moon, and there is obviously not all the extraterrestrials are benevolent. Fortunately, we've got some help,
Well, now that brings up one more quick point I want to ask you about. Grouch stated that it was his understanding that the federal government, or whoever in the hell is handling this, had at least a dozen, 12, or possibly more recovered craft in their possession. Okay? Now, with that being said, I thought about this. I mean, all of this stuff I think deeply. As a matter of fact, my wife gets pissed at me because I'll be sitting here wool gathering and she'll be saying something to me and it's like, aren't you listening? So, it's one of those deals. But I thought to myself, if these beings are so technologically advanced, okay, does it make any freaking sense that they would be dropping out of the sky? I can't hardly believe that. So, what would cause them to crash?
Combat.
Exactly. They were shot down by somebody.
It's like there's a Star Wars going.
Yeah,
no,
we have technology that does affect them. Some of them, and
but I was told that there is probably an ongoing skirmish, if you will, in near Earth space, or at least within our solar system.
This may have been going on for centuries, though, because this is what they talk about in the Nagita, whatever that thing is, Indian book, where they talked about the wars in the sky. And then, of course, in the, the 16th century, Germany, with that battle that took place in the sky above was it Germany or Austria? I can't remember which one it was. I just remember it was Germany.
It was Germany. It was a woodcut that they showed
carving.
All these different, going on. Yeah,
the little circles and then the giant arrow-shaped thing. It was just crazy. And I don't know how, because the video that you discovered and put forth, Don, from the shuttle, clearly is something happening combat-wise. It's clear. Somebody shot at somebody, and it came from Earth, and it went outward, and then we saw movement, disbursement. What was that? That looked like a weapon we don't have. I mean, at that point, we didn't have a functioning railgun.
Well, we had Brilliant Pebbles. Brilliant Pebbles was one of the Star War initiatives from President Reagan's time.
But that's in space, though. What was shot into space was from the ground, and it went up. So was it them firing at something?
I don't know. I really don't know.
There's been wars in space. No, there's no question about that. Like the Earth Alliance worked to liberate, some of the, like Mars and so forth in our solar system. I try to look for evidence. We got to keep skeptical with this because there's so much disinformation, and some people just purposely disinformation. I think they just watch a bunch of YouTube videos and they just make up shit. You know what I mean? So I try to look for
going on.
I try to look for credible evidence, especially scientific evidence, and in researching my French friend Elena, I noticed there was like 18 corroborations that she has said, and 3 of them were scientific. That there's just no way you can make it up. And the 3 are, she wrote a book detailing 110 different extraterrestrial species, so she was given access, with her implant, to be able to see what they look like, what planets and everything like that. In Proxima Centauri, she said there was 3 planets. 2 years before NASA discovered it, finally having the capabilities to see it. And then her contact Thorhan says to her, watch for Neptune. Neptune, everybody's going to be talking about Neptune. There was nothing in the news about Neptune. A few days later, Neptune all of a sudden starts heating up like crazy down in the South Polar region. And then Thorhan's on Mars. They're doing terraforming operations. He communicates to her that, they're working on the Ares Prime base, which the reptilians and the Nazis were occupying, but they've been kicked out since then. He said, we just had a huge, it would be called a Mars quake. And so what she does is immediately emails Dr. Michael Salla whenever she gets intel, and sort of has a record of it. A few days later, NASA records the largest quake ever recorded in our solar system on Mars. So it's just, stuff you just can't make up, So so I've been following what she's been saying closely, and everything that that she has been relaying. She's what you call an emissary for the Galactic Federation of Words. In other words, she's relaying the information from them. And so, I'm continuing to work with her, continuing to validate this technology that they're sharing with me to see if we can, scientifically verify it. So we've been able to, I can't verify this exactly, but we've been able to open up a dimensional wormhole with a crystal using pulsing energy into it. And anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I'm going to wait till we can get the scientific measurements and quantify this.
Dan, we're going to have you come back because there's a lot more to go into. Because I mean, Don and I are good friends, close friends with John Brandenburg. And that he's the one who not just claimed but proved that there was a nuclear event that took place in the atmosphere above Mars. In fact, there are two of them. And the residual radiation can only come from two things. One, a solar supernova, or a nuclear explosion. An actual atomic blast.
Hydrogen.
Like a planet exploding.
Yeah, and it just, there's no signs of that anywhere. We would have signs of that. So he just came down with the basic statement. It had to have been a blast. And he believed that there was a battle. That Mars was
definitely
attacked.
Scientific evidence of what you're saying. Absolutely.
So this goes back to what we were talking about before, that there is a galactic Star Wars going on. And I think Earth is somehow in the middle of this thing. And yet, we don't see it on a regular basis.
Well, I didn't tell you the other night. I didn't tell you the other night.
Oh, yeah. Don had tell Dan about that.
Well, Mark, which had to leave us earlier, unfortunately, had gone outside late at night around 9 o'clock to take a look at his yard and everything. He did a lot of work back there, basically turned it into a Hawaiian resort thing out in the desert. And he was out just checking everything before he was going to go to bed. And suddenly he said, I always look at the sky. And he saw this like a string of pearls flying across the sky in a single line, 10 or maybe even 12 bright dots of light flying toward I believe he said the west. And he stood there for a second, apparently gobsmacked. What am I looking at? And he ran inside, yelled for his wife, and he was grabbing his cell phone. He wanted to try to take a picture. When they got back out there, these things were already gone. So
not Starlink satellites or anything like that.
No. He knew about that. And he said, at first, these things were just flying along, having a hell of a good time. And he said, it just blew my mind. He said, later, I went to bed, and he said, I woke up about 3 o'clock a.m., and I said, what the hell? And I got dressed, and I went back outside to see if he could see anything. And he said, unfortunately, there was nothing there. But I don't know, Gary, did I tell you about that? You're muted, buddy.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
I never know if there's going to be a cross noise, so I always mute between discussions. But no, yeah, you were talking about it. I think yesterday or the day before my days run together.
Yeah.
I lose track of what happened day before yesterday. But I know we got to wind up here. We're at near the end of the show. I do want to read some comments from the chat to you because we interact. We love our chat, Dan. We love interacting with them.
Yeah, I love when people come up with questions. I just want to share real quick that media article. It kept expanding. I kept adding to it. So I put it online at thewebmatrix.net, and it has links to everything we were talking about.
Absolutely. Okay. And definitely, again, share his YouTube link again. Would you do that, Martin?
Yes.
But here we go. Chris Mullen, who's joined us from Australia, Australia. It says, I've heard about the Galactic Federation of Worlds, but not the Orion Group. This is fascinating. Then one of our regular viewers, Fishbelly, a good dude. One heck of an observatory, too. We're talking about the Vatican. Let me get there. Guessing in a few of our robust population, they've increased the bag limit of humans catch and release now voluntarily. And then he added that the Vatican has always been the world's largest intelligence agency, their own confessional booths, blah, blah, blah. To which I responded and said they also have some of the best physicists working for them. And that's when Fishbelly said, one heck of an observatory too. Yes, they do. I didn't know how to take that.
Yeah, the Lucifer, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, I really was fascinated when the Catholic Church stepped up. And this is part of that whole thing. It's conditioning. I believe it's conditioning. It's been going on since the 50s, slowly conditioning people to become so desensitized to aliens that eventually, when we finally have this stuff, like the government, DOD is saying, yeah, we don't know what these fucking things are. Sorry, we have no idea. People are like, okay. Hey, what are we eating tonight? Arby's? Nobody cares anymore. Well, guys like us, Dan, Don, me, and Martin too, and of course, Mark, if you were still here, I'm hoping he's feeling better. We're freaking out over this shit. We're like, oh my God, this goes even deeper, more horrifying than I had realized, and for me, like, I believed in ancient aliens. I've always believed in it since I was a little kid.
It totally makes sense. Yeah. I mean, the biblical accounts and everything. Looks like there was some nefarious extraterrestrials screwing with us.
Well, you see the reptilians, and then the first thing I think of is Quetzalcoatl, with the ancient Aztecs.
Yeah, they've been here for thousands of years.
So it's just,
fortunately, they've just recently been kicked out. So
they're the riffraff of the galaxy.
Hey, I wanted to take a very quick minute just to say this, Dan. I really appreciate your coming on here. Originally, absolutely, Dan didn't know if he could do the whole 2 hours. He had something else pop up, but he managed to do that, and we're deeply appreciative, Dan. Thank you.
And we want to have you
I knew we would get into it, so you just can't touch the subject lightly. It branches from one thing to another, to another, to another.
Exactly. And there's so much more that we need to go into, and there's not enough time because we got to wrap up the show here.
We'll do it again sometime. I really enjoyed it.
It'll be on Mondays, starting next week, 7 p.m. Central Time. So I think it'll be probably more convenient to do it
5 p.m. Pacific Time. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. So definitely want to have you back, Dan. Great meeting you, by the way. I'm going to continue with some of these comments because we have a few to get through.
Yeah, sure.
Do they ever abduct stupid people?
I think it's more based on DNA than intelligence, but
yeah. Now, Anima Confusa, I used to listen to Don on Dark Matters since the early 2000s and was wondering about him and did a YouTube search to see if he was doing anything on YouTube and found this show. So we're glad that you joined us. That's wonderful. Ariel Ballet writes, 1951 isn't real. Anything before 1990 never existed.
Boss, it's time for us.
We got to wrap. That's it. I can't get through them all. Again, thanks a lot, Dan.
Well, thanks, gang. And look, this show is the last one, UFO Wednesday, but starting August 14th, 5 p.m. KGRA, we will be back with Dark Matters 2. And looking forward to seeing you.
Dark Matters.
Those sons of bitches. Ma, I'm doing a show.